My name is Doobyis. This is Fly in Formation, and it's an interview series that I decided to start doing as a spin-off to my weekly mix show, which is called After the Smoke is Clear. On After the Smoke is Clear, or ATSIC, I bring together new releases from artists across Canada every week and play an hour worth of new release indie hip hop. Doing my best just to get as much new music in as many new ears as I can. But then, of course, the interview series here, Fly in Formation, is focused on just kind of digging a little bit deeper, getting to know the artists whose music I play, and getting to know a little bit more about each individual scene across the map, because I feel like the scenes across Canada are very much too isolated. So, in an effort to kind of unify and create some knowledge base about the other cities, I started doing these Fly in Formation interviews. But today, I'm joined by Hermit of the Woods. Dude is based out on the East Coast, I believe, although you'll have to clarify where exactly. I couldn't find that stuff online. Welcome, dude.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm out in Halifax. Well, like in the woods outside of Halifax, but
sure.
close
Lurking in the
enough.
woods. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
East Coast though. Yeah.
Perfect, man. So by my understanding, you've been doing this hip hop thing for a long time. I know you're behind the East of East hip hop archives, which is kind of covering like maritime hip hop.
That's
Um,
the idea.
and then you also, of course, are an MC yourself. So I've also been told you have a doctorate in hip hop. I'm gonna get you to
Yeah.
explain that, but I want to start first off talking about this East of East project. And just kind of wondering if I could get you to explain what that is, and I guess kind of why you feel like it's important to document hip hop history in general, but also specifically the East Coast hip hop history.
Yeah. Well, so East of East is a bit of a play on a scourge here on the East Coast. Every time a major artist announces that they're going to be touring Canada, they say, "Oh, we're gonna be playing Eastern Canada," and that invariably means they're going to play Montreal and turn around. And so I've always felt like we're kind of east of East, and we're east of the East Coast in terms of hip hop heritage. So I feel like okay, we got our own thing going on out here, but we've been doing it for a long time. The scene in Nova Scotia, but also New Brunswick, PEI, Newfoundland, has been going for 30 plus years. We don't often get a lot of shine. There's the few folks who've come out of here who have built international reputations, but not everyone has done that. And there's a ton of stuff that's good. So
Yeah.
I kind of came to it in a weird way. I started doing academic work in the hip hop world about 15 years ago and never looked back. And so eventually it just kind of made sense that I had this massive record collection. I was like, if I kind of took a minute to codify some of this stuff and catalog it, I've got the beginnings of a pretty good archive. So I started doing that, eventually started taking it really seriously, and now it's a cornerstone of what I do. And I get to do a lot of work that involves kind of promoting Atlantic Canadian hip hop.
Thanks, man. So, on the East of East website, I looked at it, and there's kind of an archive of like, all the releases that have happened year by year, cataloged for people. Can you actually listen to them there, or is it more just a reference guide?
No, it's more just a reference. I mean, once you get into making other people's music available, you enter into some sketchy legal territory.
Right.
So all I'm doing is saying this exists. This work was done. Here's some proof that it exists. Here's what it looked like. But then folks can go and look it up on their own. And I
Nice,
find that
man.
kind of works.
I saw that there's also like a family tree over there. Looking at that, I kind of wondered like, what's the cutoff point? Like, does somebody need to have, do they need to be registered with Factor, or like who gets on and who doesn't? Because can SoundCloud rappers apply? Like, where's the
Yeah.
cutoff?
I mean, well, so the East of East was always built around albums and recordings. So, albums and EPs. I kind of arbitrarily decided years ago that's a tangible piece of work. I've made records, I've made EPs. I know how much you've got to put into it,
Yeah.
especially as an indie artist. So I'm like, if you've made a recording and put it out into the world, you're good. I don't care if it's good or bad. I'm not really interested in that. But if you're actively participating and contributing to hip hop culture, uh, then I think you should have that work recognized. Eventually, like the battle leagues got in on it, and we're like, well, what about us? You know, we're out here doing stuff too. So do we get in? I'm like, well, if you've done battles that have been, put online or they're public, and if I can Google you and find your stuff, then I think you're valid. And so, a lot of it does come
Okay.
down to me making these choices. But at the same time, like if you make hip hop in any capacity, I'm interested in it. And if it's from this part of the world, I think that's part of the story we're trying to tell.
Nice, man. So in the years of watching all these different artists make all this music, can I ask you, like, do you think that East Coast Canadian hip hop is in a better or worse place in 2025 than it was,
Ooh.
20 or 30 years ago, say?
It's in a very different place. I try to resist the old hip hop head impulse of being like it was better back in the day when we did it my way and it was more recognizable.
Sure.
Um, Back in the day, again, I'm showing the gray in my beard already, just even saying it that way. But back when people were manufacturing more stuff, making their own CDs and tapes, selling stuff out of the trunks of their cars, going to shows, kind of in the pre-internet era, or even including the earliest days of the internet, there was a more tangible scene. People were working more closely together, so there was a more defined sound to the East Coast.
Right.
Nowadays, there's way more people making hip hop music, but most of it is happening at home and then turning up on Spotify or YouTube or something. It's not necessarily being manufactured. They're not necessarily playing shows. If they do shows, it's a lot of rapping over vocals and stuff. So it's a very different beast nowadays. um, People aren't collaborating locally as much because you can get online and collaborate with someone in Memphis, just as
Definitely.
easily.
Yeah,
So
regional sound is almost not a thing anymore at this point because of that,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
very much so. And I miss that. And that's partly why my focus on albums and recordings is like there's so much of that that came out of here. It's cool to kind of acknowledge that stuff, and especially the physical things that were made, because 99% of it is independent.
Yeah,
Nobody was paying anybody to make this stuff. It was all heart, all love.
definitely. So I've talked to, a few East Coast pioneers. I've talked to Chichi. I've talked to DJ Moves from Hip Club Groove.
Yep.
And I just kind of wondered, like, what would you describe the classic maritime hip hop sound as? Like, what did it used to sound like when there was more of a regional sound?
I mean, it's tricky to say that because I think I would say, as a historian who like spends a lot of time with this, there was a real abstract quality to the stuff that was coming out of here. And I think about folks like, I mean, Tachichi's up there, but Buck 65, 62, Sebutones, but also Josh Martinez, Recyclone, No Self. That stuff is not traditional hip hop. Now, a lot of those artists would say, of course, it's traditional hip hop. We were following the Freestyle Fellowship or something like that. But there
Right.
was, I mean, and there was always the real staunch purists and traditionalists too, doing, boom bap with cut choruses and all of that. But the interesting stuff that really stood out and defined the sound of this part of the world was the more abstract. It's deeply rooted in a love of hip hop, but also we're a university town. We've got 5 post-secondary institutions, so I want to say maybe a little more literary.
Okay.
There's some nerdiness to it, and
Yeah.
some like, okay. Again, I think people, even the people who were making that stuff, would bristle against that kind of characterization. That like, no, we were just making that raw and cut real hip hop. But like, no, it was weird stuff. There was some definitely avant-garde, abstract rap coming out of here. It
Definitely.
was great.
Thinking about it, like I mean, I love to see Buck 65 back making more music again recently.
Yes.
But yeah, like even when I think back of like my history of getting into Canadian rap, like he was one of the first East Coast artists I heard, and super weird sound, right? Like very. It
Yeah.
surprises me that he managed to go as kind of like mainstream as he did. That some guy out in
Exactly.
Alberta thinks of him first when I think of early East Coast rap or whatever. Like, yeah, dude's a legend,
Yeah.
but I don't know how he managed to make that work. Honestly, is there an audience for it out there for that style?
I mean, I think there was, in part because we are a university town, and he came up during the great Halifax pop explosion of the 90s.
Right.
So this is when everyone was looking for the next Seattle. And the Halifax indie scene at the time, it was bands like Sloan and Thrush Hermit, which was Joel Plaskett's band. Um, there was a lot going on, and rappers who were willing to kind of get outside the box, like Buck 65, got more gigs. They got more touring opportunities. They got picked up by Murder Records, Sloan's label, and got to tour across the country.
Right.
You know, as did Hip Club Groove. The ones who were refusing to do that, and then like, we only play shows with rappers and we don't, break out of this box. They struggled with that. So I think there was kind of a taste for that. And we're
That
weird
makes
out here.
sense.
We're cut
Yeah.
off. So a guy doing old man voices and, rapping homages to his late mother, that it connected with us out here in a way that, we like the traditional stuff too, but that feels a bit more organic.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. It's a unique place, so having a unique sound kind of makes sense or whatever. But dude, it's time that I need to ask you though. You mentioned that like this whole East of East thing started with an academic kind of pursuit and study. I assume that this was on your way to getting this doctorate of hip hop, but so I need to just explain my limited understanding as somebody who didn't go to post-secondary. I mean, I know a lot of people who have, but like, so you got to get a degree and then you spend another 3 years to get a doctorate, right? But but
A
can
bit
you
more
just write a
involved
thesis on
than
anything
that.
and say now I'm a doctor of this, or like
No,
your
it took a
doctorate is based on
lot
what
of
you write it on,
convincing.
right? Okay,
So
okay,
the first thing I did was I did a master's degree in history. That was my background, was history and political and cultural history in North America. But while I was doing that, I was making rap records, like my very first records, and playing shows with my longtime musical partner EMC. And he had these connections to do like workshops for Oxfam and various groups, and we'd go out and talk about social justice issues in the context of hip hop. And that got me thinking about the academic side. Teaching about hip hop was interesting. But as I started thinking about getting into a master's program for history, I started thinking I should do something hip hop related. So I completely bullshitted my way into university on that front. I told them I wanted to study the origins of the tourism trade in Nova Scotia in the 1960s, and they said, yes, come on in, that's our kind of thing. And as soon as I was in the door, I was like, there's no way I'm doing that. But here's the thing, no one's ever written down the history of hip hop in Halifax. What
right.
if I did that? And so again, there was a lot of pushback. They're like, "Oh, rap music, are you going to sell drugs on the side? Like, what will you do if you witness a murder?" There was a lot of ignorance around it, but I pulled it off and did it, and that led to a teaching position in a cultural studies program where I could talk about music and talk about hip hop and stuff.
Beautiful.
So I was just kind of in this academic world, and I'd been, as I said, kind of collecting hip hop records from around here forever. So I'm like, well, I've got this big pile of stuff. I've been, writing about the history of hip hop around here, and nobody else is really doing this stuff. So I thought there's kind of a lane here. And I was a parent at the time. My son's grown now, but at the time I was like, I got small kids. I can't hit the road anymore. I'm kind of here. What can I do here to keep, engaged? And so I said, okay, well, maybe I could do something with this. And if I want to keep teaching, which I started to love doing, I was like, I'm going to have to get a PhD at some point. And same old thing. I completely bullshitted my way. Said I was going to do one thing, so they let me in, and then I was like, I want to do something completely different. But I did something very different. I wanted to study how we can use like hip hop philosophies as a teaching tool, and wanting to go all the way because I never like half-ass things. I was like, what if I presented my dissertation instead of writing a 500-page tome? What if I presented it as a rap record? What if I produced an album that like, and the lyrics will discuss all these ideas and things? And they went for it. So I did that. I mean, it did come with a 200-page document that was like the longest liner notes ever.
Sure.
But ultimately I got to present this idea and this work in the form of a rap record. When I went to defend it, I threw on beats, I rapped my defense,
Right.
I was like, when am I ever going to get a chance to do something this completely ridiculous again? So
Oh, that's beautiful, man. And I mean, they probably have a tough time, arguing back against someone's lyrical output, really. I mean, I would imagine, anyways.
yeah, not so much the lyrics, but like the concepts. I mean, nobody on
Okay.
there was connected to hip hop too much, and ideally you're supposed to have somebody involved who knows the subject matter.
Right.
But we were limited to, like, it has to be a Canadian academic, it has to be somebody who does, and there just wasn't many people who did that, so we wound
Yeah.
up with somebody. Our hip hop expert was an English prof who had taught an Eminem song once. I was like, oh great, you're gonna
It's
be,
something.
yeah, you
There
clearly
you
you're the
go.
expert here. So
Yeah.
it was a lot of, kind of answering, I don't want to say ignorant questions, but like they didn't know hip hop culture, they didn't know what it was. So
That's
like,
the
why?
definition of ignorance. I mean,
Yeah, like
yeah.
you're a white dude from Nova Scotia. Why? Why this? So I had to kind of, but here's all the things. Here's what I've been doing. Here's how I've kind of come to this. So it took a long
So,
time, but it came together.
right. So are you now are you Canada's foremost hip hop scholar then? Like if somebody
No.
is looking to do that again, are you the guy to tap to be the expert or
I mean, I would say on the East Coast, I'm probably, because of my work with East of East and what I do, I'll lay claim to the East Coast. But
right.
no, there's a few great folks like Mark Campbell in Toronto, Charity Marsh out in Saskatchewan. There's a few folks out there who are kind
Right.
of doing this work and doing it, but it's Canada, so you still have to convince people that hip hop has cultural significance that's worth investigating,
Yeah.
and especially out here. If you've got a fiddle and a kilt, everyone wants to hear from you. But if you're making rap records, it's like, why?
Yeah. I always fall back to what KRS-One did in 2002, making hip hop a recognized nation of people, at least recognized by the United Nations or whatever. I feel
Yeah,
like, that's an accolade that if we're legit now, right? We're hip hop, So,
yeah. I mean, it feels ridiculous. We celebrated, what, the 50th anniversary a couple years back. Like, it's been around for a minute, and yet there's
yeah,
still people who are like, I thought it was just a fad. Like,
right.
okay, but
And even people who do know about some level of it, so many of them just think of hip hop as like the surface level mainstream, what you see promoted to the masses or whatever, which sometimes you get
yeah,
a small dose of hip hop in some of that music, but it's not really kind of the roots of what it was all
yeah.
started about, I don't think. So,
But that stuff's
yeah,
never
it's
interested me. Like, there's a million people writing books about Jay-Z
right.
and, the rise of the South, and, what Kendrick Lamar means to the West Coast. Like, that's been done, it's been worked on. I want to talk about grassroots independent hip hop communities, not just in
Yeah.
Atlantic Canada, but like, there's a great book that just came out recently on the Winnipeg scene.
Okay.
Nigel Weber wrote that. It's fantastic.
Do you know
Um,
the title of it? I want to check that out.
oh,
If
it's
you
it's
shouted out the author,
literally,
I could probably find it, but yeah,
yeah, it's literally upstairs on my coffee table.
all good.
But it's
All good.
it's kind of the history of Winnipeg hip hop. It's fantastic. But like, Saskatoon hip hop, Calgary hip hop. There's so many
Yeah.
interesting little pockets here where, if you weren't from around and if you didn't know better, you'd think, yeah, right. What have you possibly got going on in these little podunk towns that
For
aren't New
real.
York or LA?
Yeah.
There's a ton coming out of there, and it's amazing and it's inventive, and that's way more exciting to me than studying, the mainstream stuff. I don't care about what Drake's doing right now. Tell
I
me about this
agree
new Epic record
100%,
coming out.
man. And that's why I'm trying to put content about Canadian hip hop out that doesn't involve Drake and the Kendrick beef or whatever. Like, we've
Yes.
mentioned that name in a few interviews sometimes, but like it's never the clip that I'm trying to post to social media and be like, clickbait, come in and hear us discuss Drake again. Cause like
Yeah.
it's done to death at this point. And like you said, every one of these little communities, I mean, I'm just beginning to learn the history of some of these places across the map, but even now, over the past 6 years that I've been doing after the smoke is clear, like my mind has opened up. 7 years ago, you could have asked me to name 20 Canadian rappers and I would have been really hard pressed to do it. And at this point, I'm following hundreds of them and, I listen to 8 or 9 hours worth of new music every week that's just from
Nice.
those artists, right? So like you can barely keep up with how much hip hop comes out week to week. It's all I can do to choose my favorites and play them for people or whatever. But I've been absolutely blown away by just how much talent there is coast to coast across the country and how little documentation there is of it. A lot of people, have thanked
Exactly.
me for fucking getting stories from some of these legendary guys because nobody else is fucking doing it. And I feel like somebody should, right? Like, so yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
that's exactly it. And I mean, but even not even the small towns, like Toronto has all kinds of great stuff going on that isn't coming out of the OVO offices or whatever.
right.
Like
Yeah.
there's other stuff, and I find it so much more interesting. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
yeah.
the other blogs that cover Canadian hip hop are like, posting about guys getting arrested and fucking beating each other up and who's threatening who and who's got stabbed and who
Yeah.
got his chain stolen. And I'm just like, can we talk about the music? Like, what about all the music that all these fucking people put up last week? Why is
Yeah.
nobody talking about it? But yeah, so I try to keep as much focus on the actual music as I can, man.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of which, though, I wanted to get into your own music career as well here.
Yeah.
Were you? Oh, I did have one more question about your doctorate, though. Are you currently teaching hip hop? I guess. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
so I teach in the cultural studies program. So I teach a history of rock and roll and a music and culture course. But the one that I love the most is called rap and resistance, and we get to do a lot. We talk about hip hop history, but we also make rap songs. We go out and check out graffiti in the city. We talk to people who are making music, and it's a class that's mostly taken as an elective by people who are curious about hip hop. They're not,
right.
they're not destined to become the next big thing, but it's great to be able to kind of illuminate hip hop for people who are curious but don't know how to ask or what to ask about, and certainly introducing them to new artists because they've heard the top three mainstream folks.
Yeah,
They don't know anything else that goes on, and it's no fault of their own, but it's nice to be able to kind of introduce people to the culture and the practice, and especially some of the stuff going on in their own backyard.
that's beautiful, man. Can I ask you just so a little bit of background on me? I used to work at a supervised consumption site, and there I ran a hip hop program for 2 years, where I was 8 hours a day making music with people who would come through and,
Yeah.
they were the emphasis was on building bonds with people who are out living homeless or, living rough and suffering with addiction, and so that way they would have somebody to ask and that they trust, "Hey, help me get signed up to get into detox," or whatever, right? To to
Yeah.
to help open up some of those avenues. But so I had to kind of make the pitch myself about like, yeah, hip hop can be a really powerful tool to help people, be introspective and get their thoughts aligned and lay out a path as a plan of action with their words of what they're about to go do and things like that, right? So I've kind of made some of that argument myself, but I wanted to ask you, like, can you um just elaborate on what you think is powerful about hip hop that is worthy of bringing it into a teaching atmosphere? Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, on it, it sounds so cliched to say, but like hip hop saves lives. The
yeah,
people, that track that hits just right when you need it to, and resonates with you, or the sense that an artist you're vibing with is, you're able to live vicariously through them because they're kind of speaking to your struggle in a way that's empowering. But I'm also big on the creation side. I love the power of getting together with people and freestyling in a cipher, or
yeah,
sitting down with a beat looping and write some raps and then jump up and record them. Like, it doesn't have to be good, just get it down.
yeah,
And there's something about that, the creative outlet of it, but also the community aspect of it.
hundred
Lately, I've been
percent.
thinking a lot about hip hop regarding like the crisis of loneliness that people are talking about nowadays, that folks are isolated and we live in our phones, we don't get out enough. And I'm thinking, I have so much fun with my friends when I get together to just freestyle and write raps and hang out. What if we created programming, community programming in rec centers where people could
Yeah,
just come out and hang out with people who have similar interests, and nothing has to come of it. It doesn't need to make money. We don't need to make a Grammy or Juno winning record, but get together and just fart around and have some fun.
yeah,
It's so rewarding. I think if we don't consider those kind of creative outlets as therapy and mindful health based options. We're missing out. It's too good.
100%, man. The community that I saw people building, and with me myself, I had like there were of course like trained counselors and therapists on site at the SCS, who if people had like real heavy problems and wanted to talk about them, I would certainly refer them over to them because I'm not trained to really unpack any of that or anything. But just the camaraderie that you build with somebody by, like you said, freestyling with them, by just being together writing with a beat on loop and sharing that creative process. I mean, in my own personal life, a lot of my best friends are people I've made music with in the past, right? You really
Yeah.
build bonds by, I don't know, kind of kicking in that door and expressing yourself in ways that typically you don't in a regular conversation or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's
Mm.
freeing and it's wonderful. So yeah, we all need more of that. More freestyle ciphers for everyone. That would be
Hell yeah,
my
man.
platform if I was running for office.
I
Freestyles
agree.
for all.
I agree wholeheartedly. Every community should have those things out in the park or whatever. Um, Okay, so if we shift gears a little bit and start talking about your own music career, can you were you making music prior to the academic part
Oh
of it?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, long before. I was a music kid. I played like a ton of different instruments growing up, just different lessons and things. And then once I got to be a teenager in the 90s, I grew my hair. I was a hip hop kid. I mean, first and foremost, I was a hip hop kid. Um, but as I got older, I wanted to make music, and
right.
I could not figure out how you make hip hop music. There was no internet at the time, so it was like, I know there's turntables involved, but like, how do you get that from there to here? And I
Yeah.
didn't know.
Onto a record. It takes a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did what most folks did in that situation. I got a guitar and I grew my hair long and I started playing in bands, and then got a little 4-track recorder. So that was kind of the start of it. I started making recordings for my little band, and then I went away to Ontario for audio engineering school,
Nice.
and it was a really expensive way to learn how to make beats. But
The mystery unravels a bit though once you
yeah,
pay that money and go to school for it, for
yeah,
sure.
once you're in there and they show you how to do all the thing, it's like, this is all great, but this one little thing is what I needed. Thanks for showing me the MPC. I'll be over here now.
Right. Yeah.
So I was making beats, and then once I got out of that, I just started like, okay, well, now I know how to put loops together. I know how to use like a digital audio workstation and piece things together. I actually learned how to cut tape too if I needed to do that, but I knew kind of
Nice.
how to procedurally make stuff. So I took that background and I was like, well, I've been writing raps for a little bit here. Maybe I should try recording some of them. And it was really Buck 65. I've spoken about this on so many occasions, it's almost ridiculous now. But when I was living in California for a while after audio school, I was down in San Francisco one day and found a Buck 65 album in a little display in a music store. And I was like, that's that guy from home.
Yeah.
And I
You
got
found
it.
them
It
on
was
the
the
opposite coast in a different country. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm like, here it is, like we're in San Francisco, and it's cool, but it's like over here. And it was the Man Overboard album that he put out on Anticon. And I listened to it, and again, it was the weirdness and the old man voices, and that was we were just coming out of the shiny suit era of rap, and I
Right.
I kind of got away from it for a while. But hearing that Buck 65 record, I was like, oh, he's from home. He's rapping about like normal stuff. It's not tough guy shit. It's just he's just rapping about cool stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, I really vibe with this. I could probably take a crack at that. So when I moved back to Halifax, I started trying to do that.
He was the first guy that I saw actually like at a live show playing his MPC with a microphone on a stand rapping to it at the same time as he was playing the beat. And watching him
Yeah,
do that, I was just like, oh, okay.
yeah.
That's a thing that people can do, I guess.
Well,
But
and
yeah,
I had seen him one time live before that. I mean, I've seen him many times since then, but the one time I saw him before that was the Sebutones. Him and 6-2 had a group, uh, and they put on a show at this ballroom here in a hotel, old Victorian hotel, and they played with a rock band. But for their set, the Sebutones, the stage looked like someone's living room. They had couches and bookcases and stuff, and they had a table with mics boomed out over the table. And the two of them sat there playing cards and rapping into the microphones. And then every
dope.
few minutes, one of them would get up and go to the back and change the record and like cut it up and put some beats on, and then come back and sit down, start rhyming and dealing cards. I was just like, I don't know what this is, but this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. It's so weird. It's so
It's next
different.
level, man. It's
And yet
sidestepping the norm so completely. Yeah.
it was also dope. Like the beats were great and the rhymes were wild. I was like, this is something else. So yeah,
Yeah.
didn't
So do
didn't
you
take
still
much
make
to
your
bring me back.
beats then? Like, most
I
of what you
do.
rhyme on is yours? Yeah. Okay.
I I kind of go back and forth. For the longest time, I made all of my own beats, just because I knew how and I like to, and I enjoy that process. Um, a few years back, God, 10 years back at this point, I linked up with Scott DeRoss, and we kind of co-produced a record called Land of the Lotus Eaters. And since then, I've occasionally returned to Scott DeRoss, aka Deadly Stare,
Okay.
for beats for
Okay.
things, because
Epic has an album coming up with him. I want to say April 25th or something like that. Those two,
very
yeah,
soon,
they're
yeah,
dropping a full
yeah.
album. Yeah.
Admittedly, I've gotten to hear a sneak peek of that, and it's really good. So I'm excited for that to come out.
So,
Um, yeah, and I've got something cooking. I've got a couple of things cooking up with him actually. So yeah,
actually,
I
for that
still
matter,
make
you're
my
on
own.
the
And
first single from that album, aren't you? Sorry to cut you off, but I just
oh yeah,
realized
the
I
Fug
played it
Doors.
last week
Yeah.
on Atzik, and it says Hermit of the Woods on there. I had to ask Epic actually, like, what did he do on there? And Epic said you're singing in the background or
I
something.
did some, yeah, some like Motown backing vocals on it. So
Beautiful. I'll
yeah,
have to
I love
listen
that
again.
sort of stuff. I so enjoy that. I got to meet Epic many years ago. He came out here on a Spare Change tour. Came through Halifax early 2000s, and I've been such a fan of him ever since. And through kind of the Canadian underground hip hop network, we've gotten to collaborate on a couple of things like that. That are, it's just so much fun.
Yeah, man. So for people who haven't heard your music, can you just give a quick rundown description of kind of what people would expect from hearing your music?
Oh, hard to say. I mean, things have changed. Back in the day, I was a real rah, you know, fierce, politically minded, jam as many words as you can into the thing and really rage against the machine as best you can.
Right.
Um, a friend pointed out to me a few years ago. They said every time you put out a record, you use fewer words, and I think that's right. I think I'm trying to be more sparing and not be as like all the time. But I don't know. My lyrical heroes are people like Leonard Cohen. I like the poetry of lyricism. I like a clever turn of phrase. I love as like Sage Francis, and I certainly followed him into the spoken word realm of like rapper slash poet. I did that for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I try not to be too highfalutin, and I definitely run that risk with the old PhD on the wall. But
Yeah, but you could. But no,
you
most of
know,
your stuff sounded pretty down to earth to me. I mean,
I kind of try. Like I like old school hip hop. I try to keep it, I try to keep it to the traditions. I like cuts. I like good beats. I like a nice chorus. I like clever turns of phrase. I like, fun cadences and rhyme schemes. So I mean, I don't know. You get a lot of different stuff. Some of my things are real traditional. Some of my things are way more abstract. Some of my stuff is very improvisational and abstract. Um, I like making stuff. I mean, I tend not to think too much about the what it turns into. And honestly, one of my worst habits is that as soon as I'm done with a project, I'm done with it. Like I rarely stick around to promote the thing. I try to, I'm like I've already got three other projects on the go. So
I mean, you've dropped an album in 2023 and 2024 while I've been making Atzik, and like I really do my best to pay attention and click follow on every artist in Canada I see, and I didn't hear a peep about it until Epic was like, "Yo, you should talk to Hermit of the Woods. He's cool."
yeah, I
Um,
when I put out Coastal in 23, yeah, I think I promoted that with three Facebook posts and a couple of Instagram
yeah,
things. And that was
sounds about
about
right.
it. But that was enough to kind of, I sold out the physical runs, and all the people who I talked to about it, who I figured would want to hear it, got their hands on it. I was like, oh, that's good enough. And I'm already into the next thing. So
There you
like
go. Hey, if you
catch me on
sold
the
out the
next one.
physical run, you're doing something right, man. That means you've got a core fan base who's rocking with it. So yeah,
Well, I
good
mean,
job on
like
that.
Pharaoh Monch said, I went wood in the hood. Like I didn't exactly sell massive numbers, but like,
Yeah,
I'm not even trying to. If I can, I like physical things. I like CDs and tapes. I love still having those things. So I like making a couple and, get them to the people who might be interested in that sort of thing. And then my job's done.
yeah, fair enough,
Maybe.
man. So I was gonna ask you, like, do you think that the PhD in hip hop has kind of altered your musical output? And then you kind of mentioned that you've been using less and less words, so maybe it's actually convinced you to dumb down a little bit more than
A
you
little
were
of
prior,
both.
or okay,
I mean, I hadn't really the last. Let me see. I put out a record in 2016, and then I did something with a group with the MC called Higher State. We put out a record, and I think 2017, and then we put out a remix version of that in the early days of the COVID pandemic.
okay,
But I hadn't really made like a solo record since 2016, when I delivered my dissertation record in 22. Having spent a year, making this very academically focused rap record, I was like, okay, well now I'm kind of back in the groove. I'm back into making beats. I'm back into writing again. Maybe I should make another record just that's not about higher level educational theory. Uh, you
sure.
know, so
I mean, they say the average person in our society is reading around a grade 6 reading level right now, so, like,
yeah.
we do have to be careful. There's definitely a possibility of just, like, losing everyone if you start talking in two-syllable words, you know? Uh,
I once stepped off stage. I played a show, and Ghetto Socks, he said, "Wow, that was like reading a book." And I'm like, "Okay, I hear you." So it's like, noted.
I mean,
So
from
yeah,
another
so
MC, that might be a compliment, I've
I
talked to
I
Ghetto
think
Socks
I
too, and he
read it
seems like a pretty
correctly.
smart guy, but
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. But I think
okay.
I was like, maybe I'm being a little pedantic here. So well, let
Sure.
me kind of slow it down. So Coastal was really just like I'm all revved up for making this dissertation record. I just kind of want to make something fun, and I want to,
Yeah.
like, I put a posse cut in there. I just grabbed a bunch of people I've always wanted to get on a track with. Like, let me just have fun. I don't care. There's a song about my dog on there.
I
I
like
wrote a
that one.
song about how
That's a
much I
jam.
love tacos. Like, it was just having fun, and that's kind of been my motive ever since. Is I just want to make stuff and have fun doing it. And if anyone wants to check it out after, cool.
Yeah.
But selfishly, like, I need to be making beats. I need to be writing raps. I need to have some projects in the fire. So yeah, I don't know. And some of them, like, I'm working on one right now with beats by Deadly Stare, and I'm Recyclone and I are collaborating on it. And it's maybe the most literary thing I've ever worked on. Listening back to it, I'm like, oh, this isn't some other, dimensional type shit. And then I've got another project on the go where, we're trying to take on the political raps and kind of look at the world right now and be like, let's get back to that style of stuff. And
But I think that there's a lot of space right now for people to get back to some political raps. I'm a little bit
needed.
discouraged with how little political rapping I'm hearing over the past,
Well,
year,
yeah,
and especially past couple of months, really. But
it's frustrating, but I've also noticed there's a real conservative bent. Maybe that's just out here, but like within the hip hop community, I'm seeing a lot of, and I'm like, we clearly didn't come up on the same records, because like y'all are embracing some
yeah,
weird stuff that doesn't jive with hip hop.
I agree, man. In Alberta, it's largely the same, and I have kicked that idea around a lot. I think it's not that we were coming up on different records, but that we take different things from them.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
A lot of people seem to have just heard kind of, the came from nothing and now I'm rich thing and been like, well, yeah, I'm going to do that too. And that's a really capitalist conservative idea, really. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm about me and fuck everybody else kind of thing. And
I also
it's
I
not what it
wonder
meant to
about
me.
I wonder about people's motivations for making stuff nowadays too, because I hear a lot. I mean, I spend a ton of time, like yourself, checking out new stuff because I'm constantly adding things to the archive, and
Yeah.
I check out all this stuff, and I find a lot of it. I'm like, I don't know, why are you making this? Like, I can't quite discern what the message is, and if you're not particularly devoted to the culture, and people do that in different ways. So I'm not trying to pass judgment, but like, sometimes I'm like, this just, it feels like you're doing this because it's cool, and it's something for you to do and get social media clout from for a couple years until you walk away from it forever and settle down and live a life. I don't know why you're doing it other than you can and it looks cool. But yeah,
I
with some of it, I'm just like, I don't get it.
I would guess some of it is like guys trying to clean drug money, honestly, from what I see. Like some of the people in that lane, I feel like, they've seen
Yeah.
some of their heroes say that like that's how they clean their drug money. And they're like, well, I've got a bunch of drug money. I'm going to fucking say that sold out this show and now I can fucking write it off on my taxes or whatever. Like, I don't
Yeah.
really know the ins and outs of it, but like, yeah, I agree with you. I can't figure out why. Because they wrap the content a lot of the time is like about how devoted and dedicated they are to getting more money. And it's like, okay, but there's a lot easier ways to make money than making music in Canada, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's
exactly. And
pretty tough to support yourself in Canada.
I'm not opposed to like, hey, check out all that I've earned raps. I mean, I think for a lot of folks that still makes sense. And you need to still reinforce that yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm just like, I'm not sure why you're here. And like maybe it's valid. I don't mean to take away from it, but
Sure.
I can't quite figure out like what is why this? Why have you chosen rap as your format? Why
Yeah.
this?
Can I flip that on you? How come you've chosen rap as your format? What is it that drives you to make music or has driven you through the past?
Man, I've tried to get out on a few occasions. I for a minute there I was like, I'm gonna sell it all. I'm gonna become a country singer. And
I
but
mean,
I keep
Hermit of the
coming.
Woods, it kind of sounds like
It
maybe
could
you're
work. Yeah,
half
I
stepping
just
away.
I've thought about it. I mean, I love all kinds of music. I came up on a million different kinds of stuff. My parents were huge music fans. I was exposed to everything. I'm absolutely voracious in my consumption of music. And again, I teach rock and roll. I teach music cultures from around the world. I love so many different things. I was a hip hop head coming up. Like I just think it was woven into me at a time. I don't want to be all like back in the day, the golden age, but I lived
Yeah.
through that. I
Yeah.
remember the day the Wu-Tang Clan 36 Chambers came out.
Damn.
That meant something to me. And so as much as like I like to pull out a guitar and write a song with a guitar. I like playing with different formats, but when push comes to shove, and I'm like, okay, I need to like make something. I need to get this out of me. It tends to be hip hoppy, and when I've tried, I'm like, I'm going to try to make something acoustic or something folky or even country adjacent. I know how to make hip hop records. I don't know how to make those types of records. So I'm like, well, I've already got sampled beats and I'm using like synth bass. I'm like, this is already starting to skew to hip hoppy for this anyway. So I can't escape it. I keep getting brought back in, and I love the idea of doing different things. But I guess now I've now in my old age and wisdom, I'm like, let me just incorporate that into my rhyme practice. Same with the
Yeah.
academics. It's like hip hop's not going away clearly, so I'm just going to have to make everything fit into that framework rather than trying to set that aside and do other things. It's part of me now. I can't escape it. So here we are.
Okay, fair enough. I'm guessing from your stage name that you're a little bit of a reclusive kind of a guy. Is that on
Yeah,
point?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, my mother used to call me a hermit when I was growing up because I'd spend my evenings home, making music and doing drugs in the basement.
Sure.
And
As
I've
one
often
does. Yeah.
wondered though, I wonder about rap names. I'm like, to what extent do we become the personas that we take on? Because as I've
Ooh,
gotten older, I'm like, has my social awkwardness and alienation grown because I'm like, well, I'm hermit, damn it. I can this, it's
right.
expected of me. I can I don't need to go to the after party. I'm just going to bug out, and that's who I am. So, but then it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, yeah.
Yeah. How about this question, man? I like asking this one to people. Do you get more fulfillment from being on stage or in the studio making the music?
Oh, that one's easy nowadays. Studio. I I've performed I think 3 or 4 times in the last couple of years, and honestly, at this point, I dread it.
Yeah.
I mean, several times a week, I get up in front of a classroom and do stuff, and I regularly do big, events and things at the university where I work. I have no problem with that, but the idea of getting up on stage at my age, trying to remember all these rhymes, trying to deliver them without being winded, trying
Right.
not to look like the world's oldest man still trying to rap.
Right.
Um, like that interests me less. And as I said, I'm kind of here for it more for the creative process. I love getting together. I love to write raps. I like to make beats. I like to record the stuff and mix it and do some cuts and have some fun.
Yeah.
The other end of that, like getting out and performing it live, I'm not saying I'll never do it again. I probably will, but it's not what excites me about it anymore. So
I can understand that, man. The stage used to call to me; it no longer does for a long time at this point. It's a lot of stress getting up there. And then I personally kind of sometimes walked away from shows feeling like, is that fucking worth as much stress as I just put myself through prepping up for this? Like,
yeah,
to go rap for some people at a pub or whatever. Like, I don't know.
yeah, and I was always antagonistic about performing too. I liked the old punk ethos of like it's me against the audience, very Iggy Pop, like you are,
Right.
And nowadays it's like I don't want to be getting in people's faces, and people just want to dance and have fun now. And then I'm around like we're gonna rap about why Donald Trump sucks and
Yeah.
what we're gonna do about it. No one wants to hear that shit.
You also mentioned like trying not to be the oldest man alive trying to rap still. And that's another question I ask a lot of guests is like, do you think hip hop is still a young man's game? Because at this point,
Nah,
a lot of those like OGs and legends we came up listening to are still running around doing their shows and still putting out new music. There's a new Wu-Tang album about to come out, you know?
yeah.
So yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't
I,
think
I
that
think
there's
it
any
used to be.
reason. Yeah, okay.
It used to be that, but for reasons though, like it was because hip hop was still new. There weren't any rappers who had been around long
Right.
enough to be the
Yeah.
elder statesman of rap. And of course, rap radio is in crisis because there's not a lot of venues for, classic rock still promotes old artists releasing new stuff. That's how the Rolling Stones won a Grammy for best rock record in 2024 or
Yeah.
25, whenever it was. Like, come on now. But it's because they're supported by, there's an avenue for that stuff to be put out. People aren't checking for the new Rakim album. They're not checking for the new, KRS project. But I think we're starting to see that now because there are older artists who are putting stuff out, not just the mainstream artists, but folks like Buck 65. Not that
Yeah.
he's, the oldest man alive. He's a little older than I am, but he's kind of found this, I don't want to say late career because I'm hoping this is like mid period for him, but technically it's late career resurgence. He's kind of found the fire again, and I love that. I want to
Yeah, man.
hear what old people are saying. I want to hear Andre 3000's raps about having a bad back and going to the chiropractor. Like,
I agree. I was disappointed with his saying that he has nothing to rap about anymore, and I thought like there's a lot of fans who have aged too, right? Like that, like you
yeah,
said, artists have now aged up in hip hop, but like so have people who are listening to hip hop,
yeah,
and 45-year-olds don't necessarily want to hear the music about like turning up and shooting people or whatever, right?
no,
The
and
various things in the mainstream.
that's
Oh,
the thing about music and culture in general. There's a place for all of that. All of that is perfectly valid, and the young people should be leading that charge and giving us
sure.
club music and
Yeah,
wild out bangers. But I'm also curious to hear like what older folks have to say, with their earned wisdom and their perspective.
definitely.
Tell me
Yeah.
about your life. That's interesting to me too. It doesn't have to be what it was, and I've really embraced that with my new. I got a new project coming out. Deadly Stare on the Beats. Uh, Fire is going to be the name of it, and it's about having to find a different kind of approach. That the things that drove me to make rap records when I was 20 aren't the same things that drive me now. I mean, there's still all the political bullshit out in the world, but like I'm not out at demonstrations raging against the machine. I've got bills to pay and a dog to feed and a job. So my priorities are different. The reasons why I do it are different. The
Yeah.
content is therefore different. And so I think that's valid too. You got to have there's room for all of it, I guess, is my point. And
Yeah, but
I like that.
personally, I think more artists should put more of their actual lived experience into the music. And, as we age, we get more and more lived experience to talk about. So I don't see why people feel like they need to stop talking about it at some point or whatever. But it is what it is, I guess. Teach their own. Shouts to
I
Andre
love it.
3K.
Give us old man raps. Give us old lady raps. I saw
Yeah,
Ice-T a few years ago live, and he came out and he was like, "I'm the oldest man in rap. I'm 63 years old." And then he did New Jack Hustler and like tore it down. So
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
still possible. Not
yeah,
everybody can do it. There's some folks who are little too out of shape, a little too winded, and maybe they got to get back into it. But for the folks who are still interested in making it, the folks who still want to do it. I want to hear it. I love it.
keep at it for sure. Yeah. How about what's your feelings on social media with the changing landscape of trying to market ourselves as musicians or whatever, and it becoming completely reliant on social media?
I generally think social media was a bad idea. I think as in terms of humanity, I think it was a wrong turn that we took,
I
and
think that might be fair to say at this point.
it
Yeah.
has destabilized society in a thousand different ways. But music, especially, I mean, I think the role that social media and online played in devaluing music, in not just lowering but removing bars to entry. And I'm not suggesting that it should be gate kept and elitist, but like, you used to have some skills. You used to have There was a minimum level. You're going to have to go out and rock a show to get your name out there. You're going to have to
Right.
put out a piece of music that somebody likes. You're going to have to kind of earn it. And nowadays it's like, I made this whole thing in my basement with my friends and everyone at my school liked it, so now I've got 1,000 followers, and it's just, it feels inorganic. As you said, it's taken away from like regionalism and local sounds. It's oddly discouraged collaboration as much as it has encouraged and enabled it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, like all things, it's got its ups and downs. I'm a bit of a snarky old curmudgeon, so I think mostly downs.
Fair.
But recently, I've been trying to get rid of it, and I can't because I'm like, oh, for political and ethical reasons, I don't want any part of it. But it's how I stay connected to so many people. It's how I stay engaged and aware of things that are happening. So it's the worst, but it's there. It is.
This is a question I have asked to other people, but don't ask to everybody. But I feel like you've kind of touched on that, like you used to be very politically inclined with your music. Um, do you think that hip hop in itself leans towards either side of the spectrum of political life, left or right?
In a tricky way. I mean, I always catch myself when I want to say, because I came up on Public Enemy and the Goats and Paris and all this, and I'm like,
Yeah,
was on some rah rah shit. But I always have to catch myself. I'm like, but hip hop has always been very conservative. I mean, in terms of the inherent homophobia and misogyny that are present in a lot of it, like, that's
yeah.
not terribly progressive. So as much as we were talking about progressivism in some areas, in other
Right.
areas, hip hop was always kind of retrograde. In some areas that's gotten better, in other areas maybe it's gotten worse. And I think
Even
we
as
just
far as
swap
like
out the bad
gun
guys. But
rights, you can't take hip hop's guns away. That's for sure. A lot of the people in American rap are gonna not like that. Um,
yeah, so I love the idea that it's more to the left of the dial. And I think I've tended to gravitate towards artists who are on that end of the spectrum, but I have a hard time saying that that means that it's all that. I think
fair, yeah.
there's always been a conservative strain, and so nowadays when I see people, you know, rapping about all kinds of anti-gender, everything, I'm just like, "Mm." But you're not the first to come out against sexuality or gender in rap music, so I'm like, oh, I don't like it, but it's not new either.
Yeah, true enough, man. Old habits die hard a lot of the time in topical genres like this. But um, about what else do I have here? So I do want to. Well, I kind of wanted to talk either about your upcoming project,
Mm,
which I didn't know much about, but now you've mentioned it's all on Beats by the Deadly Stare.
yeah,
Any release date or
soon.
projected time of it arriving?
I did mention how much time I spend in the back end of like promoting and planning these things, so
Sure,
it's pretty much done. I think we just got to get it mastered and then really pick a day and drop the thing. um,
nice.
so but that'll happen fairly soon, just because I want to get it off my plate and move on. And it was kind of
Would you
a
say
holiday
it's an
project.
evolution of your sound, or more of the
E-
same kind of?
I try to do something really different with this one. So every year around the holidays, when I've got a few days off, I try to do a little musical project of, record a little EP or something, just to give me a project I can work on all night long while I'm home and don't have to go to work.
Sure.
And so this year I was like, I kind of want to do like a little hip hop EP. And I reached out to Deadly Stare and said, you got any beats kicking around, like any cast offs and throwaways, anything that you just kind of can't get rid of, send them my way. And he sent me 12 little snippets, and I was like, I like all of these as they are. And he was like, I can expand them, and I was like, no, I'm going to make a micro album. Every song is going to be one verse and a hook, and then out into the next thing.
Okay.
And a lot of
And
that is because I watch my students all the time. Like, they live in their phones and they're just constantly scrolling through their stuff. I'm like, our attention spans have shrunk. Uh, Even if you look at listener data from things like Spotify, the trends seem to indicate that people listen about the first minute 30 seconds of a song, and then they get bored and move on to the next thing. So I'm like, what?
yeah,
Don't
there's a lot
belabor
of
the
2 minute
point.
long songs coming out these
Yeah.
days. That's
So it's
about the
it's kind of punk
average, I'd
rock,
say.
just get in, get out, say it fast. So I've got this whole little thing. The whole album I think is 14 minutes, but it's 12 songs. and
Nice, man.
so it's quick ideas, but it's also kind of a new statement of purpose where I'm like, it's me thinking about how do you keep making rap records as you get older and as your
And keep them
priorities
relevant,
change.
right? If you're paying attention to, like, okay, what do I have to do to stay inside their attention span?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely adapting to the current climate of hip hop or whatever.
Yeah. So a lot of it is just, I had this idea. I've got this weird format I'm going to do it in. And let me just play around and see what I can come up with. But again, it was about having fun. I just wanted to make something. I wanted to flex those muscles and do some writing and try some different stuff. And I love that too, like constrained writing. Okay, this one I'm gonna only write, with this perspective, or I'm gonna, keep this one to this kind of rhyme scheme or something. So I like
Okay.
just giving myself little challenges to try it this way, try it that way.
How does writing typically go for you? Like, are you kind of locking in with a beat on repeat and sitting down to write a verse and that'll be the entire verse? Or are you the type of guy that's always writing a bar here and there in a phone kind of thing?
I've always got bars going in the phone. I've got a ridiculously long note in there that's just an endless stream of like one-liners and little couplets and things.
Okay.
It really depends on the process. This thing that I'm doing with Recyclone and Deadly Stare is much more thought out and trying to be very precise about what is being said. But also because we're collaborating with each other, so we have to kind of, okay, what are you saying and how can I respond to that? Um, Other times it's, yeah, sit down, throw the beat on loop and bang it out. But then I've also got this project called Unco Funko, which grew out of freestyle sessions that we used to have, me and
Okay.
Unco Catfish. And that turned into, what if we take this freestyle ethos of ours, anything's fair game. We don't record stuff because that, Heisenberg effect and all that, but like we're just kind of in it. What if we had took the same approach to music making? We throw on a beat, we sit down, we write it in the moment. You have 20 minutes, write your verse, and then we're going to come back and do it.
Okay.
But we also do like, okay, we're going to write 3 lines each. So I'll say 3 lines, and you have to resolve my thing, and then I'm going to set up yours, and then you can. So things
Yeah.
like that, where we just try to play with structure and form and have fun with it. So it's more about the process of making it and just trying to be challenging and doing that. And then if it turns out cool, great. So
So that Uncle Funko album, most of that was then like in person sessions with you and Uncle Catfish?
yeah, we would sit there and I think I made most of the beats for that one, but we had a couple of other beats, and we would just sit down and be like, okay, we're making 3 songs tonight, and these are the beats. We'll start with this one, go. We'll write it, and
Yeah.
then we're not even taking the time with that one to do like professional audio. I can set up the whole booth, but with this one, it's like, no, plug in the SM58 with the speakers still going. We're just going to use the polar pattern to, cancel as much of that out as we can. And if it creates a weird reverb or delay, so be it.
I couldn't
Like,
tell as I listened to it. Sound quality sounded fine to me, man, compared
yeah,
to
so it's all
anything
like,
else I hear. Yeah.
it's down and dirty in terms of the process, but it's more about the process than the finished product, because it's all about, with this one we wrote 3 lines each, with this one we wrote 2 lines each, with this one we wrote whole verses. But it was about giving ourselves fun little challenges and projects so that when we get together we can make records.
In my last few interviews, I've kind of asked people about skits and heard heard negative opinions on skits. That no one likes skits. And then I was listening to yours today, and I was like, this guy's ordering at Denny's in between the songs on this Unco Funko album. So I wanted to ask you about like skits and what specifically on Unco Funko, the thought process behind including some of those kind of impromptu skits
Yeah.
between songs was.
I mean, those were when we started that first Unco Funko project, and we're well underway into a second one by now. We took a weekend. We kind of had a weekend retreat. We all came here, uh, and so when we went out, we would just kind of hit record on our phones and set it on the table. And then we just realized, like, well, we've got just kind of random audio. Like, it doesn't need to be about anything, but like if we take one of these beats and throw it under there, like then it's a sketch or an interlude or something.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was any much more thought to it than that. But really, I kind of like the idea that it doesn't really matter anymore. Like, I'm of the opinion that art is entirely subjective, and you can put kind of whatever in there, and somebody will be like, "Oh, I get what this is supposed to be," and like it doesn't matter what I intended it to be. If it the end result
Fair.
kind of if it sounds vaguely cool, that works. Good enough.
How about the new album with Deadly Stare? You got any skits on there?
Oh, maybe there's one little bit. I think there's one little bit where I'm like talking to him in between tracks.
Okay.
um, but not much because we're not sticking around long enough to get into anything. So
Because honestly, these guys' opinions that they don't like skits kind of surprised me because the skits have always been around hip hop, and to me, like
eh,
especially for lyrically dense artists, it's you don't want to just have an hour of somebody yelling raps in your ear necessarily. You got to
yeah,
have musical interludes or something other than just Buddy rapping at you the entire album.
I like them if they're done kind of judiciously and
Yeah,
artfully. Like, I came up in the era of like Prince Paul making De La records, and those skits were elaborate and well thought out and really set the tone.
right.
And I've heard a lot of great ones since then, but I've also heard a lot of people who the skits are there because you're supposed to include skits, and they maybe you know
Didn't
they
need to
don't
be.
they don't have an idea for it. They just like they need to fill that space, and so it ends up being some ham-fisted thing, and I'm like, okay, that was, if there's intent behind it, if it's like, okay, it feels like a coherent idea, then I'm all for it. But if it just feels like something you threw in there because somebody told you, like, you have to include
Right.
a skit, and now it's like, here's me doing something stupid, like, okay, what is
Yeah.
that?
Fair enough. They're very hit or miss. I feel like skits. Um,
The
how
great
about
ones
this?
are really great, the terrible ones are really terrible.
True, true, yeah, and we remember either of them. We remember the terrible ones just like we remember the great ones, looking back or whatever. But how about looking forward into hip hop? Do you have any predictions of kind of what's coming next in hip hop, like where the genre is heading, or what might be the next big thing or whatever?
I don't know. I really like some of the confessional tone that has entered into hip hop. I mean, I feel like the underground indie rap scene was doing that for a solid decade before,
Right.
mainstream artists started getting into it. But I like that. I like that more and more artists are getting away from the idea that you have to rap about X, Y, and Z, and anything else isn't valid.
Yeah.
Um,
Shouts to Kendrick for pushing some of that right into the main stage
yeah,
spotlight or whatever. Yeah.
but like, Tyler the Creator is one of my favorite artists lately, and it's because, I mean, when he's producing his own records, he writes his own raps. He's not afraid to get weird. There's like
Yeah.
solos in his beats. There's a musicality and a curiosity and an exploratory nature that I love. And it ends up, I kind of equate him right now to like Stevie Wonder in the '70s, where it's this run of records that are just like, oh, this is all connected, and there's an arc that you can follow, but it's interesting and different, and I kind of love that because it's just not the same old thing.
Yeah.
But that said, I found a record yesterday. This guy sent it to me to add to the archive. And it's real, like, traditional boom bappy stuff made by a 40-year-old guy who's never made a record before because life got in the way. And it's just as traditional as you can get, and I love it. I'm so I've played it like 20 times in the last few days. It's not breaking any new ground, but I'm also just like, oh, it's just great.
I definitely stumble across stuff like that and think the same that you just said, that like, wow, this is really good. It's not, a new sound. It's not breaking ground, but it's top quality of what this person set out to do. You can tell that they practiced a lot doing it or whatever. And yeah, so I try to make a home for
I
some of
like
that on my show. Yeah.
I like experimentation. I'm a big fan of the big Left Turn record. Like I'd never listened to a Lil Yachty record in my life until he put out that, Still Here record a couple years back, and it's just like, this is so weird. I
Yeah.
love this because it was a wild swing that could have gone all the way wrong, and yet it was just so, again, curious and inventive and willing to do something different.
Yeah.
That's
As
great.
much as there is to be said for staying in one lane and mastering that one style, I also agree with you. I like it when artists will switch it up album to album and just
Yeah.
experiment. Because, like you said, it doesn't really matter. Just put art out into the world, and so what if it
Yeah.
fucking fails and nobody likes
Whatever
it?
form it takes, like,
Yeah,
it just be interesting though. Like, show me what drives you to make this stuff. Like, show me the drive. Show me your
hundred
spirit or your
percent.
soul or whatever. I mean, that gets into corny territory, but like,
Yeah,
give me something other than,
cliches are cliches because they ring true a lot of the time, right? Like,
yeah. But
So
also, like, I don't like the clout chasing. Oh, this sound is big, so I'm going to do that. Like, oh, just
right.
give me something fresh, or something not fresh, but just do it well. And
Yeah, yeah. Well, and doing it well, even if you are making traditionalist boom bap, doing it well brings a level of still uniqueness. And you've got to be an instantly recognizable MC on the beat, or I'm not going to think it's like you're not doing it well, right? Like, so yeah, I want
yeah.
guys to even make traditional boom bap with their own spin on it or whatever. You can't be a sound alike of anybody else, but yeah.
Yeah, I was
uh
teaching this last night in class. I was teaching a section on how to write raps, because my students are about to do that. So I was like, I'm going to have to explain to you like how to count bars and what does
yeah.
flow even mean, and like,
That's a
how do
tough one.
we? It is. Thankfully, I had like some good clips from Rakim talking about like John Coltrane and like how, rappers are more like horn players, floating over the beat rather than somebody singing a melody in a traditional, musical sense. So,
Yeah,
but it was always the end result was, don't sound like somebody else. Try to, start there, sure, but try to find your own voice and
100%.
do it your own way, because I can hear the other guy do that by checking out the other guy, like.
Well, yeah, nobody wants to hear knock off that guy. They want to hear that guy, right? If
Yeah,
that's the sound they're
exactly.
looking for. Yeah.
I love
Um,
that. I mean, I take that also back to like KRS-One. He came to Halifax back in like 2008 and gave a talk. And that was one of the things that drove me to studying Atlantic Canadian hip hop. He said, I'm here in Halifax. I want to hear Halifax rap. He's like, I'm from New York. If I want to hear people rap about New York, there's a million of them down the way. Like,
yeah,
what do
yeah.
you have? What makes you different? What makes you worth checking out? I
I
really
think it was
took
the
that to heart.
2023 album Coastal that had like Scotian slang or something like that, the
Yeah.
title of one. But yeah, you
Yeah.
definitely got some of the regional, vocab and regional slang in there on that one.
I love that. Like, I like the idea of sample like pipe and drum music. Nobody touches that stuff. And old
Yeah,
fishermen, the diddly diddly, like that's all just
right.
old fisherman songs. But like nobody's touching that. But that stuff comes from here. Are we all old timey fishermen, living in the bay? No, but that is part of our identity. It's not our whole identity, but it's a part of it. So I love the idea of like, no one else is going to do that. You're not going to get a
Yeah,
rapper from Arkansas incorporating maritime sea shanties. So like,
exactly.
I might have to do that.
Yeah. I like that idea, man. So every interview, and I know we just passed the hour mark, so
Oh,
if you've got to go, I can excuse you out of this last segment, but I do have one more
no.
segment here. Okay, so I ask, how important is this or that? You can be long-winded, or you can just be like, not very important, and we'll go on to the next one. It's kind of just a conversation starter, but how important is it that listeners understand your lyrics?
Ooh. Not at all. I think there was a time in my life when I would have said very important. I'm so clever. I need people to understand how clever I am. Because
Right.
look at what I just did there. I wrote this thing and it's so beaming with meaning and you have to get it. And now I don't think I care at all. I'm like, people will interpret lyrics in whatever way they want. There's a word I used on the Unco Funko album that doesn't make any sense. I don't know what the word is. It just came out of my mouth when I was recording it. And when we've performed it since then, in the few public performances of Unco Funko, I just mumble through the fake word because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Nobody hears it anyway. And it was just like, oh, whatever he said, it sounded cool. It's like, it doesn't matter.
You
So
wouldn't be the first rapper making up a word, right?
yeah. So I'm like, I used to be it used to matter a lot that people know. And now I'm like, I don't care. Take whatever I mean, hopefully people don't interpret it in some weird, arch conservative way.
Yeah.
We wrote a song once where we
Antithesis
were
to
like,
what you actually meant. Yeah.
there was a higher state song once and EMC hit me up. He was like, if the Freedom Convoy people got their hands on this track, they could very much misinterpret what we were saying. And I was like,
Right.
oh yeah, they could have. Like if in the wrong hands, that could be weird. Thankfully, no
Yes.
one did. But
Saying fuck Trudeau got weird for a while there and still is to this day, right? Like, I mean, none of us are real big Trudeau. Like, I feel like a lot of guys who were kind of traditionally anti-government had to
yeah,
fall back from being like fuck Trudeau because then it was like people would also think I'm about to drive to Ottawa or whatever.
well, and also like, yeah, Sage Francis said many years ago, fuck whatever is a lazy man's rebellion. And I was like, yeah, I like that. I also saw a guy
Yeah,
today driving around with upside down Canadian flags and a giant fuck Trudeau on the side of his car. And I'm like, he's
still at it.
leaving though. So like,
Yeah.
what are you gonna do with that giant painted fuck Trudeau on your car?
Yeah. He probably hasn't thought it through. I don't think I'm assuming too much when I say that the guy probably hasn't thought that one through. Uh,
Yeah.
what's going on with these how important ones? How important is a message in your music?
Ha. Again, I think that's changed. I still think it's hip hop music. Hip hop should say something. You should have a point,
Right.
but
Some
that
of the
can
time,
mean different
anyways. Sometimes you
things.
can rap about your dog, right?
Sometimes
Sometimes you
the
can make
point
the
is
fun song.
just sometimes the point is I'm good at rapping and look at what I can do.
Right.
Ta-da. You
Yeah.
know, so sometimes the point is just showing off a bit. Sometimes the point is that one cool line that you buried in your verse, or sometimes the point is much more profound. But again, where meaning and understanding are pretty subjective, if there's a point in there, I know what my point is. Hopefully that's intelligible to others and they pick up on it. But also if it's not, like, okay.
Yeah.
But I still I like stuff that has something to say. My son listens to a lot of drill music, and my one criticism of it, well, not my one criticism, but I have a few. I'm old,
Yeah.
but I'm like, I don't know what they're trying to say. Like, I hear that, I understand what's being said, but why? Why do I care? And so I think to a degree, I still like a point, but I'm not going to be mad at something for not having a point.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one, man. I like that answer. How about how important is album art?
Ooh, very.
Like the cover art. Yeah.
Yeah, I like album art. I mean, as somebody who archives hip hop recordings, maybe, not surprisingly, I'm a fan of album art. But back in the day, I was somebody I didn't like the pen and pixel stuff coming out of Cash Money and No Limit. I was like, oh, it's cheap and it's ugly, and
Cheesy. Yeah.
But I had also grown up on like Blue Note jazz records and classic rock records where art meant something. And the Hypnosis albums that or Hypnosis design on Pink Floyd covers and things like that. I
Right.
love it's a chance to be artful. It's a chance to contribute context to what you're doing. It's the first point of access people are going to have. So I think you need to have something that is visually stimulating or at least relevant to what you're doing. And I see a lot of people with bummy album art, or like it looks like they broke out MS Paint. And I'm just like, you put all this work into your thing and then you put an ugly hat on it. Like,
Yeah.
what a shame that is. Because
So would you delay an album if you don't have the right album art for it? Like for this upcoming album, do you have the cover picked or?
I had the cover made about halfway through.
Okay.
I've dabbled in visual art myself a bit, so if I'm
That
waiting
helps
around
then.
too long, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna make something. And it's one of my favorite parts of it. I like that aspect of it, of like, okay, now I've done this part, but now I get to kind of shape the visual portion of it. So let me do and I'm not opposed to, like, I'll make a woodcut, and print something, and here it is, or use collage or something, or just do straight up drawing and painting and things. I love that creative part of it, so I'm always going to be that's always a big part of it for me, is what's the art going to look like, and how do we get to that.
Is your visual art, does it tend to be more hip hop inspired? Like, is it graffiti steez or
No, not at
okay.
all. I've never had any real aptitude towards that. My art process is usually kind of like my approach to hip hop. I just kind of just dive in and do it. So I like doing kind of single line drawings. I like collage stuff. I did a whole series a couple of years ago. Now, weed may have been involved, but I was like dunking a bottle opener into melted red candle wax, flinging it at a page, and then trying to discern from the splatter, like, what is the image, and then just adding as few lines as I could
Okay.
to create an image.
Yeah.
um so that sort of stuff, where
Cool.
there's not a ton of, I don't like to slow down. I don't like a lot of overthinking. I like to just make the thing. There it is, it's done, get it out.
Fair enough, man. How about how important is working with one producer to develop a certain sound?
Ooh.
I feel like some new artists, especially guys I used to kind of work with and people I have worked with over the years, often will say to me, like, I want to learn to make my own beats so that I can have a real unique sound. Or they want to find one producer and really build with that one producer so that they can
Yeah,
kind of dial in this one sound.
I like that. I mean, again, I'm old school, and I've made my own beats. I come from audio engineering and production, so I've always admired those who can make their own beats and write their own stuff, because you're the master of the house. You're in charge of all the aspects of production, and you're not reliant on somebody else who may
Right.
pull the plug or not come through, or but I do like kind of collaborating. Like, me and Deadly Stare have kind of found a good groove, and I don't work with a ton of other people, but I like his style, and I think our styles work well together. So I've returned to that well on a few occasions, and will continue to, as long as they'll have me.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I think nowadays, again, it's that changing nature of the music, and you've got a lot of people who are buying beats online. And they're even doing this, like, the beat leasing stuff, where you get to
Sure.
use the beat for a bit.
Yeah. You get
Why?
1,000 plays on it or something. After
And then it
10,000 plays, you got
returns,
to
and
re
some
up your
other
lease
guy's gonna
license. Yeah.
get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's also contributed to the lack of a regional sound, lack of a cohesive sound. If you've got 10 different producers all over your record, if there's not an intention to try and find stuff that works together, then you end up with just this grab bag of stuff, and it doesn't feel cohesive, and it's a collection of singles rather than an album or an EP. I
Yeah.
like stuff that has kind of a focus. So working with one or a few producers to create a focused sound, I like that. I find it, though, once you start getting every track is by a different person, or even if it's every track is from the same online beat mill, I just find, like, okay, what is this?
Yeah.
It doesn't cohere as well as I like. So
Fair enough, man. That said, I will add just my own opinion that I've always loved it when an MC can jump onto any beat and still do something with it, right? Like to hear
yeah.
the legends on different producers' beats has always been one of the most fun things to me, right? So yeah.
Well, it adds diversity, and I love that idea. But we do that a lot with like our freestyle nights as a challenge. Like, throw on
Right.
different styles of beats. Here's a drill beat. Here's a trap beat. Here's a tango instrumental that has no drums in it. But like, what are you going to do with it? Here it
And
is. Go.
yeah, and that's
So
probably
you
a good
kind of,
place for that to happen at the freestyle nights or whatever, maybe more so than on somebody's
yeah,
actual project. Yeah.
try stuff out, like, but I love the idea of just do it, do the thing. You know your craft, you know what you're supposed to do here, so here, go for it and see what comes out of it. And in those freestyle sessions too, it can fail miserably, and then it's all just like, well, that was a good try, and high fives all around, and then something else happens. So,
Right. Yeah. Couple more of these, man. How important is an artist's physical location?
oh, very.
Okay.
I mean, I would love to say that it doesn't matter anymore, and the internet has leveled the playing field. But I've told a lot of artists from Halifax, like, you've got something, get your ass to Toronto or New York or LA,
You
because
don't
you
think
can get
Halifax is a big enough hub? I feel like Halifax is kind of there's to
you
me
could do a
like
lot of
watching the
things.
scene. I see Toronto, I see Vancouver, and I see Halifax. I think probably is third. Like
Yeah,
I think yeah.
we know we've got a huge music industry. We've got a long musical tradition. We're a very musical city. Nova Scotia's a very musical province. The Maritimes in generally are very musical. But the things you're going to have to do in order to take it to the next level beyond that are
Right.
significant. Like, the nearest metropolitan center out of here is Montreal. That's a 10-hour drive.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're in New York or Toronto, you within 6 hours you can hit multiple major cities and those markets and play those things. So the physical geography is limiting, but also you can be doing wonderful things, and the local music industry may pay attention to you, but there's no major labels out here. There's nobody who's buying for film or television.
Right.
Whereas if you're coming up in Chicago or New York or Toronto, there's a chance that somebody of great consequence or with a great role in the music industry might be at that show, or could be coaxed into coming to the show. So you have those opportunities to, I think of
Shake
like
more hands.
Chance. I think of
Yeah.
Chance the Rapper, who came out of Chicago with, like, within 6 weeks of putting out his first EP, he got an offer to tour with Childish Gambino. And I'm like, that right there is what I mean. Like, if you're in the right
Right.
place where people of consequence can find you, you have the opportunity to go do bigger things. And folks who have left here have had greater opportunities. But the ones who stay, I think it is an uphill battle, because geography is limiting in terms of how you can get there, but also who's out here. We're not on the circuit in the same way. So
Yeah. Makes sense. I hear that. Although I will say, you make it sound like nobody gets past Montreal. I see quite a few people like doing the East Coast tours,
yeah,
Mickey O'Brien's out there and
well, we do get a lot of
some
indie
people
artists
come through. Yeah,
like
okay.
that. I love, we get a lot of that. But, like, in terms of major shows, we get people at the very beginning of their career or at the very end of their career, when they're, like, on their legacy tour.
Right.
Nothing
Yeah,
in between. And so, yeah,
that
I
makes
always have a
sense.
lot of love for, like, the indie artists and stuff who come around, because we'll love that and we'll support the hell out of that. But,
The
like,
big mainstream artists though, they hit,
they just
Toronto,
announced a
Montreal,
big
and then back.
show here in Halifax this summer, and it's going to be Nickelback playing on Citadel Hill. So, like, that's what people
Get your
are.
tickets, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right. So it's like, you know okay,
Yeah.
you know
I
that's
mean,
what we get out here.
fair, fair. Um, about how important is an MC's fashion?
That's a good question. I mean, I
Man,
think it's helpful to have, like, a look, I guess, or an image or something. I mean, it's gimmicky, but I think that's helpful if you have a visual presentation that makes it. Now, that said, I'm probably the most non-fashion minded hip hop person out there. I think my standard attire was jeans and a t-shirt with nothing on it. And by
yeah,
design, like, very anti, no logos, anti-corporate. But, I think if you've got a look that works. Although I worry, because sometimes I see people, I'm like, you're all look, and you know, there's no music under that. So what am
yeah,
I
yeah.
here
You don't want
for?
to be that either.
I'm here
Yeah,
for the fashion model, not for the music. And I thought I was here for the music. So yeah, it can go both ways. But I think, yeah, I mean, you got to have some. You got to bring a little razzle dazzle. I mean, that was Buck 65 thing. He used to carry a pocket full of glitter and throw it up in the air just for a little flourish. And I think that
sure.
people underestimate the value of that. That one little thing separated him from the pack in 1,000 different ways. So I think, yeah, having a little bit of something is definitely helpful.
I have no idea whether you press vinyl or not. So this, how important is pressing vinyl?
mean, I think everybody should do it once or twice if you can. I've gotten to make a couple of records, and I love it. I mean, I think you feel like you're contributing something. By the same token, I think making tapes and CDs are important. You're contributing a physical thing to the record. Maybe they all end up in the dollar bin or a landfill somewhere, but it exists. That's now a
Yeah.
tangible thing that you can say this is out in the world, and especially for hip hop artists, hearing your own voice on wax, being able to walk over to it, and scratch your own stuff. Like there's just something about that that feels validating, and you're now doing the thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. All right, so you aced that how important section. I liked all your answers, dude. I ask everybody the same couple of questions before I let them out of here, but this thing is very close to wrapped up, so bear with me here.
There, yeah, done it.
Before you go, can you describe your local scene, local hip hop scene in Halifax?
Ooh, local scene here is interesting. I mean, the hip hop in Halifax ebbs and flows very much. Um, so here's what I'll say about the current hip hop scene in Halifax. There are a lot of people making hip hop music right now. There are a lot of people trying to put on shows and kind of keep that happening. There's various groups like the Ibex Music Group that are putting on semi-regular shows and trying to get people out. And it's kind of like the old days of stacked bills and everyone's out and doing stuff.
Nice.
But I think people are also really struggling with getting people out to shows. I see a lot of video from the shows where it's like there's three cameras on the artist on stage. They never really turn those cameras around and show how
Right.
few people are in the place. And if you go to those shows, you're watching the artist through their friends up on stage filming them. So things have changed significantly, and I think it's changing how we're able to engage with the live scene. Um, I don't think it'll ever go away. I hope, but I think we're definitely in one of those low periods where there's not as much happening. All the respect to the people who are out trying to make it happen and putting stuff on in
Yeah.
one way or another.
I'm
But
gonna say times are tough right now, man. Everybody's scraping, trying to make, make sure that
yeah,
they make ends meet and keep food on the table for their kids or whatever. So
and
yeah,
it's weird out there. Like everything is strange now. So I get it. People are like, I don't want to. But also, like, places are still hesitant to book hip hop shows in this day and age. So, you'll have hip hop shows on a Sunday night or a Monday night or a
right.
Tuesday night.
Yeah,
And it's like, I know that's all you could get, but like, I got to work in the morning. I can't get out there. And
100%, man. Yeah.
Halifax, very differently from the rest of the world, I'm guessing. Halifax always had a weird thing about shows. If the show says it's going to start at 10 o'clock at night, no one's touching that stage until about 1 o'clock in the morning. We don't. We go out and hang out with our friends and pre-drink before things, and then don't go out afterwards. So Halifax shows have traditionally always started really late. No one's touching that stage till at least midnight, no matter what it says on the flyer. So if you're going out, especially if it's on a weeknight, like you're gonna pay for that on the back end.
Feel like I've been to like a fair number of hip hop shows that are like that, but then there's also ones where they realize it's a Tuesday night, so they need to, get
Yeah.
somebody on stage at
As
9:30 or
I
10
get
and
older, I
yeah,
love those shows where it's like, no, no, we'll have you out of here by 11, and that's
yeah.
reasonable, and I can do that. But if it's like, if I'm looking at the lineup and like nobody's even planning to hit the stage until we're
Plus
already,
the other
I
thing
can't do it.
sometimes is that a hip hop show, everybody and their dog is a rapper at this point, so it's like they've
Yeah.
got 9 openers and nobody fucking wants to see any of them, and they've come for the one guy and then have to sit through, yeah, nails on a chalkboard for
Well,
3 hours.
yeah, and I mean, there is a lot. I'm a big champion of Atlantic Canadian raps. I don't like to throw anybody under the bus, but like the changing nature of hip hop also means there's a lot of bummy rap out there right now. There's a lot of
Yeah.
like, kind of dirty t-shirt juggalo rap where it's just like, I don't care about this. Like, it's again, I don't know what the motivation is. Not sure what the message is supposed to be. I'm
That's
clearly
a
not the
really
target
good way to sum
audience.
that up, man. I see a lot of dirty t-shirt juggalo rap out here in Alberta, and I mean, like, even doing a hip hop show from Alberta, I assume people assume that it's going to be a bunch of dirty t-shirt juggalo rap, but I swear it's not, guys. Come tap in and check it out. I play
Yeah. I
all
mean, and
sorts
it's
of good
just like
shit.
I struggle with that because like I want to like it, but there's a quality level, and I'm just like I don't. Yeah, you have created a rap song. It's not a good song. Like I don't.
Yeah, are you
Yeah,
expressing anything with it, or yeah, just are you
yeah,
rapping for the sake
it's
of rapping a lot of the
it's
time?
bumper sticker sentiment and a lot of platitudes, and it's a lot of like this song's called Turn Up, and this
Yeah,
song's called Shut It Down, and this song's called Way We Go, and I'm just like these are all just these empty sentiments of, and you're just bringing back these rap tropes and saying, I know rap does that a lot, but like it
yeah.
feels emptier somehow. It's not the
And
same as
one of my favorite things is when artists can take that same trope and do it in a new way that still makes it feel fresh somehow, or come up with some new witty wordplay about how they're going to shoot some guy. And I go like,
yeah,
holy fuck, I've been listening to music about guys shooting each other for 30 fucking years, and I've never heard a guy say it quite that way. That's a witty way to say
yes.
that, like there's still a way to do it if you want to stay inside those trope boxes,
Oh
but
yeah.
some of it's just talentless. I
Well,
can't
and yeah,
sugarcoat it, man.
and that goes back to social media and everything. Like I think we've enabled an awful lot of like bummy rap to exist on par with the stuff that there's more artistry in or more intent.
Yeah,
So yeah, I
100%.
and you don't know what you're gonna get. So that's why it's a grab bag. Like you might go out and find the greatest artist you've heard in years, or you're gonna be sitting there like, oh, I can't believe I'm paid, $10 to get into this shit. And
Yeah.
it's 1 o'clock in the morning on a
Gonna
Tuesday,
go
and
out
like,
for
God
another
damn it.
smoke.
Yeah.
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 Um, okay, so can you name some artists from the Halifax scene who people should be up on? Because this show is about spreading love and positivity. We're not here to shit on all those whack artists. We don't talk about them.
Well, I mean, I'll
Just
I'll, I'll speak beyond Halifax. I mean, because my work purview with East of East is Atlantic Canadian stuff. So
yeah, perfect.
there's folks from around. I mean, from Newfoundland right now, Albert Dalton, Reggie Morales, and Cat Cafe are making records that I keep going back and checking out, and I quite love that.
Yeah.
Um, I'm working on a PEI based art gallery exhibit for this summer. That's going to be in Charlottetown. So I've been listening to a ton of PEI stuff lately. Always been a big fan of like Eric Broadbent over there, but currently there's a guy who goes by the name of Beanock, and
That's a
oof,
new one to me. I'll have to check that out.
he's a Mi'kmaq dude. His last album's called Res, and it's great. He makes his own beats. I mean, I'm not trying to tell the guy's whole story, but like he's a lobster fisherman when he's not making rap records. Like this guy they should make an 8 Mile style movie about this guy. He's incredible. His story is remarkable, and
And
he's
so
so
many
good.
MCs have just these blue collar jobs. Like so many of the guys that I've
Yes.
talked to are fucking yeah, just
And then he
busting
steps
ass
off
to
the
make
boat
money,
and
and then
makes
they go rap on the
magic.
side. Yeah,
And it's so good. So I love that so much. So Beanock is fantastic out of there. But also like, Vince the Messenger is pretty great, and Lavender and Cabby. There's a ton of people coming out of PEI right now.
yeah.
New Brunswick, my favorite artist out of there right now is kind of a very indie artist, goes by the name of Summoner Breeze, and really makes that like I make the music at home, and it's handmade beats and interesting rhymes and experimentation and abstract, and I just love it because it's inventive and fun. And
That's
then
another
like
one I'll
Nova
have to
Scotia
check out.
stuff.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
definitely do. Yeah,
that's why I ask artists this is because if anybody knows the dope artists, it's the artists themselves, right? So yeah,
yes. Oh, and then well, I mean, Halifax is such a big scene, and again, it's all of Nova Scotia is kind of interesting. I mean, there's the big players, like Quake Matthews is always kind of doing things. And of course, Classified, everybody knows Classified, but like everybody knows Classified, so you don't need to hear about that.
sure.
Um, but
Shouts to him anyways, though. I mean,
oh,
yeah,
yeah,
maybe there's
no, of
somebody out
course.
there who hasn't heard music.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I mean, who do I like? I mean, I also consider a lot of expat artists. Like Buck 65 has been in Toronto for a long time, but I still consider him East Coast, and like his recent run of records has been incredible. So a lot of that stuff, but you
I
know,
didn't know he'd moved to Toronto. As far as I was concerned, that's a Halifax guy.
oh
But
yeah,
yeah,
no, always. And even 6'2" is kind of coming back. He's got a new record I'm looking to check out. But like Tachichi's still absolutely crushing it, and working
Yeah.
with Lavender on a lot of stuff.
He dropped a
One of my
mixtape a little while
favorites.
ago that was super dope. Shouts to
Yeah,
Chichi. Yeah.
yeah. But one that I'll give you that a lot of folks don't know about is an artist by the name of Black Rook.
Okay.
Used to be in a group called the Caravan. It was like a live band with, up tempo, high energy raps. He's now kind of shifted gears and he made a new record called The Black Rook last year, and it's great. And not enough people are paying attention to it. And I'll shout that from the rooftops all day because it's a fun record, and it's one of those ones where you listen to it and it's like, oh, I like this. I feel this. I want to go back and listen to it again. Some of these songs are sticking with me in a way
Nice.
that nowadays, you hear again that first minute 30 and you're like, all right, next, next.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like those records that come back at you. So anyway, yeah, all that. And of course, my stuff, which is fantastic and everybody should check out.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of your stuff, anything we can plug? Any tours? Any shows? Any, I don't know, upcoming releases? Anything else you want to tell people to look out for?
Well, I'm gonna have this fire record out. I mean, assuming that's still going to be the title, I might change that because it's super basic, but like, whatever.
Yeah.
That'll be coming out sometime this spring. I'm hoping this year that this project with Recyclone comes together, but it's likely that would be later in the year. Um, I got a new project on the go with Higher State. As I said, we're bringing that back, and Unco Funko 2 is like well in the works. So a lot of things kind of coming up. But the big project I'm working on right now is this art gallery show for PEI. Last year, I got to do an art gallery installation based on the archive, showing kind of the history and material culture of Nova Scotian hip hop. And so this summer, we're going to take over the Confederation Center Art Gallery in downtown Charlottetown. Charlottetown's not a place that really values hip hop culture, and Charlottetown has always been kind of the little brother of all the regional scenes. So
Yeah.
very excited to get over there and put on a show, or an exhibit rather, that really celebrates all the artists who've come out of there in the last 30 years. So that's kind of my big project that folks could actually go and check out, is get yourselves to Charlottetown and go learn about Charlottetown hip hop, because it's going to be great.
Cool. That's going to run through the summer, or when is that?
Yeah, I'm told it's in the summer. We're still figuring out the exact dates, but yes, during the height of tourist season, we're
Nice.
going to make hip hop a palpable presence in downtown Charlottetown. So looking
I
forward
might
to that.
actually, check and see if I can, because we've been talking about maybe taking a trip to the East Coast. So, maybe I can line up
Oh,
some dates and get through there for that. That would be very cool. But
well, yeah,
you mentioned, so Uncle Funko is you and one other guy, Uncle Catfish, was it?
Uncle Catfish. Yeah.
Okay, can you tell me about him? Who is that? That's a new name to me. I didn't even realize that there were two of you guys on that project.
He'd not rapped, but this was his first rap record. But he's an old friend. He used to have a radio show called Potato Salad Radio Show on CKDU out of Dalhousie University, and for several years, he kind of steered that show towards interviewing rappers and getting
Nice.
everyone in there. So he became kind of connected to the scene, and we were good friends. And that led to these freestyle sessions. We called it whiskey raps. We'd drink whiskey and rap for 6 hours on end until we collapsed and could rap no more. And we decided to try. He wanted to try and make a song. We'd spent all this time doing that, so we again took a weekend. We were like, let's make a song. I think we made 4 songs that weekend, and those interludes at the
Okay.
restaurants.
Right.
As we were like, this came together pretty well, and we had a lot of fun doing it. So we just kept at it and kept going
Nice.
until we made one. We put that out. We released it on cassette, and pretty much immediately we're like, can we just keep going? Can we just keep making more? And so we're about 7 or 8 tracks deep into whatever the next one's going to be.
Love to
So
hear it, man. Yeah.
yeah.
What's the best way for people to support you or other artists that they like?
Ooh, well, I mean, really support Atlantic Canadian hip hop artists in general. We're pretty fantastic out here. There's a lot of us doing great work, and
Yeah, but
everybody
what's
could
the
use a
best
little
way?
extra support.
How should people do it? That's the
Well,
question these days. Is
I should
like
just
a lot
post
of
my
people.
Venmo or whatever.
Well, seriously, a lot of people think that like, oh well, I listen to music. If I go stream your music on Spotify, like I'm supporting you now, right? And it's like, well, actually,
Yeah.
I mean, artists recognize this, but a lot of people outside don't. that like Spotify doesn't pay anybody jack shit unless you have
Yeah,
a
true.
billion fucking streams a year. So it's kind of supporting, but
Yeah.
could
I'm
go a
about
little
halfway
further.
on
Yeah,
Spotify too. About half of my stuff is on Spotify and streamers. The other stuff isn't.
yeah.
Bandcamp is always good because
Hear you.
artists control Bandcamp. I put everything up there, but also that's where you can get physical stuff if you like tapes or CDs or vinyl, um, all of that. But also like check out the archive. It's eastofeastarchive.com is the website. I had to build that shit, and I don't know how to build websites, so like it's not the smoothest, but like it's a good representation of what's going on with the archive and that ongoing project. And
Is it
other than
still a
that,
work in progress? You're still adding to that website as time goes on, or are you pretty much wrapped up
always
with it?
I
Okay.
this week I just entered another 100 albums into
Ooh,
my spreadsheet, which I then have to take and upload online. So we're closing in on 3,000 albums. So that's
beautiful.
3,000 Atlantic Canadian hip hop albums. Again, most people don't know we have got anything going on over here. So it's like, yeah, no, there's a lot. It's great.
Yeah,
We've
yeah.
got a bunch.
Dope,
So
man.
yeah,
I'll have to check that out. How up to date is it? Will it be like do you got 2024 on there?
2024 is in there. I'm starting to add 2025 stuff
Okay.
on there. I've also got a new updated version of the family tree because that one was kind of difficult to read and hard to do. So we used this art gallery show to crowdsource corrections. We blew it up and we put it on the wall, and then we had post-it notes so people could say, well, actually this should be over here, this
Right.
should be over here, and oh, you're missing this person, this should be. So we kind of crowdsourced corrections. I need to put the updated version of that on, but I'm a
Cool.
one-man army with this archive project, so it's like when I can get to it I will get to it.
I know the
Until then,
grind, man. I also didn't know how to make my own website, but here I am running a website and posting over there. And the reason that I kind of asked about like is 2024 up is because like on Spotify, I also maintain some playlists that are just like every Canadian hip hop album I find, I add it to
ooh,
this Canadian hip hop 2025 list, or but I've got one for
I can
2024
definitely
as
help
well.
with that. I'm
Yeah,
pretty
and
sure the end result, I wrote it down at some point. I kind of told people how many there were, but I'm pretty sure there were about 150 albums out of here just last year alone.
damn.
So
Yeah,
like,
I definitely didn't get all those.
nope.
I got hundreds from across the country, but probably not 150 from just the East Coast. Yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
no, we go pretty hard with it, and again, it's all independent, so a lot of it, doesn't get out as far as it should. So it's a great place to at least say, well, but here it is. It exists and should be celebrated.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing that work, man. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and help document this culture. That's what it's all about. Appreciate
Always
you, man.
happy to. I love a fellow traveler trying to do the same thing. So
Yeah,
mad
right.
respect.
The more people pushing in the same direction, the better. So yeah, props, dude. All right, it's been fun. I'll talk to you online sometime, or hell, maybe I'll make it to the East Coast this summer. You never
Do
know.
try. Look me up.
All right, man. Peace.
Thanks so much.
All right, everybody. So thanks for coming through. Thanks for hanging out. Appreciate y'all. Um, there are a bunch more interviews coming up. Let me see if I can press the right button and get that on screen. Get it right spot, maybe. There we go. Okay, so today it was Hermit of the Woods. Everybody should definitely go check out East of East. That's his hip hop archive, and also find his music on Bandcamp. Support over there. Um, Next week, I talk with Kaboom Atomic and the Dirty Sample. I really like their new album, 2 Cents. I've been playing some stuff from it on AtSick lately, and it's really dope. Of course, the Dirty Sample, Calgary-based producer, and Kaboom Atomic, I believe, is a say Vancouver-based artist. I think he's someplace out on the West Coast, although I could be wrong. I don't actually know him, but I have talked to the Dirty Sample several times, and that's always a good time. Through next week, twitch.tv/Doobyis is where these things always happen. March 18th, I'm talking to Edmonton's Trips. The week after that, on March 25th, I talked to Arlo Maverick, also of Edmonton fame. We're going to talk in that one specifically about kind of grant writing and the whole some of the perception of the grant system that I've covered with other artists in the past has not been too positive. Where Arlo definitely is somebody who you know, is part of these grant systems and has been not only an applicant and someone who has won a lot of grants, but he's been somebody who helps other artists get grants, and I believe he sat on juries and stuff too. I know he's kind of like somehow involved even in like the Junos, so he definitely has a lot of behind the scenes knowledge to share. I'm looking forward to talking to him March 25th. April 1st, I talked to Calgary based MC Halfcut. We had to reschedule that one because of a work conflict the first time that we booked. April 8th, I'm talking to Danny O, Toronto based artist. Dope album out last year. April 15th, I'm talking to Ezza, who this week I just saw say that his upcoming 10-track album is going to be the best thing out of Canada in quite some time. I messaged, well, I think I actually jumped in the comments and said that, like, man, all you Niagara rappers tell me that you're the best. Sazy told me he's the best in Canada. Dialect Sosa told me he's gunning to be the best in Canada. So I told Ezza, like, you guys got to fight out who's best in Niagara before you take on the rest of the country. But the week after that, I talked to J.O., formerly J.O. Mayers, April 22nd. He is one half of Run and Gun, and he's got another solo album coming up. So make sure you tap in for all that stuff. And mixcloud.com/Doobyis is where you can find the archives for After the Smoke is Clear. That's where DJ Dice and I play a new hour worth of independent Canadian hip hop every week. It's always mixed, mixtape style. DJ Dice is better at it than I am, but I dabble with the turntables at this point. We make it sound real nice. The weekly show. It's won the best rap program in Canada award before from the CCRA, College Community Radio Association. Like, been nationally awarded. I'm quite proud of ATSIC, and definitely people should tap in. So like I said, mixcloud.com/Doobyis is where you can do that. Mixcloud is a British owned app, and we play 100% Canadian hip hop on there. So if you're boycotting America, that's the place to start if you still need your hip hop fix. What else can I tell you? Doobyis.com is the hub for everything that I do, and I do my best to keep it updated week by week over there. So definitely check in over there and stay updated on what is going on in Canadian hip hop. Appreciate y'all, and I'll catch you next week.